जय भीम, नमो बुद्धाय।
जय भीम मंगेश।
जय भीम। जय नमो तस् भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा संबुद्धस्स। नमो तस् भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा संबुद्धस्स। नमो तस् भगवतो अरहतो सम्मा संबुद्धस्स। So today we have entered into the 50th week of our study of the Buddha and his Dhamma. And today we are going to look at the end section 5 of part 2 of the book 4 of the Buddha and his Dhamma. And so far we have been studying about how the similarities in the terminologies, particularly the terminology like rebirth, karma, ahimsa, and transmigration, how because they look similar to the Indic words that have been prevalent at the time of the Buddha, and the way the Buddha has seen them, and what is the source of confusion there was between all these views about a particular terminology, and what was the Buddha's position on that. We have seen in the previous sections of this part 2. And I think Baba Sahib Ambedkar very remarkably has demonstrated that the Buddha's view about the karma is not related very much to the rebirth, and he has divorced the concept of rebirth from karma, and karma as an ethical action, in the world, karma as an agent of the moral change in the world has been so beautifully and clearly laid by Baba Sahib Ambedkar. So the moral order of the world, whatever it is, it doesn't depend on any god, or it doesn't depend on anything else, but on the actions of the human being. So if the world is moral or immoral, it depends on the karma of the people. And we have also seen the doctrine of rebirth in terms of how Baba Sahib Ambedkar has clarified it in by raising the two questions: rebirth of what and rebirth of who. And we have seen this very beautiful tool of raising questions. So if we raise the questions, and if the questions are fine-tuned, and if we conceive the questions, half of the answer is available to us, because the art of questioning and art of framing the question is also important. And we have seen time and again in our studies of the Buddhism that Baba Sahib Ambedkar has framed the right questions in order to seek the answers. And the rebirth, because all people talk about rebirth, but Baba Sahib Ambedkar asked the question, rebirth of what and rebirth of whom? And rebirth of who, we know that there is no substantial self. So we are not sure whether the same self or Atma is going to be born again and again. And what happens after the death has been very beautifully explained by Baba Sahib Ambedkar. And as I said in the previous classes, that the greatest discovery of the Buddha was to know that there is nothing concrete, or there is nothing permanent in the world. Everything is in the flux, everything is in the flow. And the Buddha has usually three beautiful words. Asati na paritasati. Asati means, why do you lament on something which doesn't exist? So we are always lamenting, always being sad over Atma. Somebody said something to us, we feel sad. We feel that we are going to die, and because that language is there, I, we, me, mine. And the Buddha says that in the ultimate analysis, if we dig deeper into your experiences, you cannot find anything independent. Your existence itself is interrelated, dependent on so many things, so many factors. So having said this, the conclusion is that the Buddha has summarized in three words: asati na paritasati. So whatever doesn't exist, why do you crave after it? Why do you run after it? Why do you get burdened by it? Why do you get troubled by it? So I think for Buddhists, this is like a mantra: asati na paritasati. Don't overwhelm by something which doesn't exist. And the Buddha found in the ultimate analysis that anything like self or permanent existence doesn't exist, and everything everything comes into being because of the causes and conditions. And when the causes and conditions are gone, the phenomena disappears. So rise and fall, as we talk in Buddhism, rise and fall of mind, rise and fall of bodies, rise and fall of feelings, rise and fall of breathing, so on and so forth. So we can clearly see how Baba Ambedkar has clarified all these terminologies vis-a-vis the words and terminologies used by the other schools. So having done this comparative analysis between the words used by the Buddha and the words used by the other school of thoughts, Baba Ambedkar is now putting gaze back onto the Buddhists. And in this section 5, Baba Ambedkar has very beautifully explained what are the causes of this misunderstanding. And that's the beauty of the Buddha and his Dhamma. It doesn't leave any hole. It doesn't leave anything that is not that cannot be examined, or it is a very tightly knit book. So if Baba Ambedkar says something, he will substantiate it either from the Pali canons, or by using the rational mind, by using his researcher's brain, and so on and so forth. You see, Baba Sahib's methodology, when he studies Buddhism, or when he tries to bring something out of Buddhism, he is not just widely read, because we know that Baba Ambedkar was thoroughly grounded in the Buddhist texts, and he has read widely about all different schools of Buddhism, and he has this mind of a researcher, to dig the truth, to go after the facts, to know as it is. And having these qualities of Baba Ambedkar's mind, when he's saying that there is a misunderstanding because of the terminologies, he's now going after what are the causes of this misunderstanding. Why we think of rebirth, why karma is conceived in a way that is not by the Buddha, not taught by the Buddha. Buddha taught it this way, and people take it that way. So let's look at what are the causes of this misunderstanding. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to read the verses, and then I'm going to gloss over some of the interesting facts about it. So let's look at the causes of misunderstanding. Verse number 1 goes like this. What the Buddha preached was heard by his audience, which largely consisted of the bhikshus. So largely, the Buddha has given discourses to the bhikshus, and we know that that time the art of writing was developed, but it was mostly put for the business or accounting purposes. The writing has not yet become, the language of the religious discourses. And that's why we see that the Buddha is credited to have developed or even invented the language of Pali, to teach his Dhamma. So what the Buddha preached was heard by his audience, which largely consisted of the bhikkhus. And of course, we know that the Buddha gave teachings to all different sections, to the kings, to the lepers, to the poor people, to the women, to the prostitutes, and you name it. The Buddha has never discriminated when it comes to teaching his Dhamma. But largely his audience was made up of bhikkhus. And we know that in the suttas, we see that the Buddha addresses his teachings to the bhikshus. And we know that, this Buddha has a very beautiful format. He responded to the questions of the people. He responded to the needs of the people. So on a very few occasions, we see Buddha giving the discourse. Most of the times, the Buddha is answering the questions. Buddha is answering a particular quandary. Buddha is answering a particular puzzle. Buddha is answering certain problems facing the people. So you see, the main audience of the Buddha was the bhikshus. It is the bhikkhus who reported to the people at large what the Buddha had said on any particular matter. So you see, the Buddha being the principal teacher and the bhikshus being his students, they were on the forefront of education, Buddhist education. So whatever they learned from the Buddha, they would go out among the people and teach them. It's like, you have been trained for some time. Now you know certain things about the Buddha's Dhamma, and then you go to the people, as the Buddha says, go out in all directions. Don't go in the same direction, two of you. Two people should not go in the same direction. Go in the different direction and preach, spread the Dhamma for Bhujan Hita and Bhujan Sukhai. So we know that the bhikshus went all over the places. They traveled far, and they taught what the Buddha taught them to the people. So the verse number 3 goes like this. The art of writing had not yet developed, The bhikkhus had therefore to memorize what they had heard. So you see, in Pali or in the Buddhist hybrid Sanskrit, we see that the most of the suttas or some of the teachings have been read, have been written in a mnemonic format, in terms of the lists, in terms of verses which are very easy to remember. So it's said that if you read the Dhammapad or the Buddha's some of the teachings, they automatically come to your tongue. That is the beauty of the way the Buddha has used the language, so that people can memorize it, isn't it? So they have to memorize, and that's how the Buddha's teachings were codified, so that the people could memorize them easily. So we see the repetitions in the Pali text, or in the Buddhist hybrid text, or any Buddhist text. We see the repetitions going on all the time, the same thing but with different variation, so that the clarity around that particular concept is revealed to the readers. So the Buddha will take one concept, then he will take a 360-degree view of that, and then by that pedagogical exercise, he will try to make us understand what Buddha is talking about. So that's why I think we should have this habit of reading the Buddhist texts all the time, because they are like aid to our memory. And one of the connotations of the word sati or mindfulness is to have a memory, smruti. Even in our meditation, we practice smruti. So we as a Buddhist, we have to create this smruti to memorize some of the teachings of the Buddha, so that when we need it, they automatically spring in our mind. I encourage this very much, because if we keep on reading the Dhammapad, every day, for example, 1 or 2 verses, some of the verses just sit on our tongue and they spontaneously guide us. So memory or memorization has certain advantages. And I particularly find this very useful, in studying the Buddha's Dhamma, because some of the verses just help us when we need them. So memorization is very important. The bhikkhus had therefore to memorize what they had heard. And even today, in some of the Buddhist traditions, the people give importance to memorization of the Buddha's texts. I read somewhere that there were bhikshus in the recent times in Burma. They could memorize and recite the entire Tripitaka, because from the very early on in their age, they started recitation. We might not match them, but I certainly think that we should read some sutras that we like very much, and read them continuously, if possible in Pali, so that we can, the Pali is a very beautiful language, and sometimes they spring up in our memory when we need them. So that has been a Buddhist tradition to recite, to memorize. And the Buddha called it Shrutamai Prajna, because that time people used to understand anything or gain any knowledge or any information to listening. And that's why Buddha Sangha is called Savaka Sangha. Shravak, of course, has a related to hearing, and it's in English, it's called the hearers. So now in the today's parlance, we can say studious, because now this, we have to study. So study has a tremendous importance in Buddhism, isn't it? If we are trying to follow something, and if we don't know, if we are not studied the way, we cannot end up going there. So studying, that's why we have to continuously study the Buddha and his Dhamma. So not every bhikkhu cared to memorize what he heard. There is always a problem of communication. So whenever I talk something, you receive through your eyes, and in between the transmission, there can be some loss, there can be some noise. Sometimes you can be distracted. Sometimes my speech might not be clear. Sometimes what might happen is that our minds are already filled with some ideas. Sometimes our minds might be totally occupied with something. Sometimes we have an exactly opposite ideas of what I'm talking. So it creates a dissonance in the mind. So there are a lot of problems in communication, isn't it? Particularly oral communication. And we have all seen how the problem in the communication arise because of the miscommunication in all the walks of life. So, I don't think that the Buddhist Sangha was being an exception. So the Buddha has always this habit of repeating something, clarifying something, extending it so that more people can understand, give more example, more stories like Jataka stories and so on and so on. The only aim of the Buddha was to explain, his Dhamma. So he used these all different techniques, all different literary forms to communicate his Dhamma. So, there is always a problem in communication, but there were some that had made it their profession to memorize. They were called the Banakas. Now you see, there were some people in the bhikshu, among the bhikshus, who made it their job just to memorize the suttas, just to memorize the Vinaya, just to memorize the Abhidhamma Matikas, and so on and so forth. And of course, it was needed. They were like the libraries of the time. For example, Ananda was a very vast library, and he was blessed with a profound memory. So what Ananda used to do, he could recite a lot of things, suomoto. You just trigger him and he could recite. And he made it a condition to the Buddha that whatever he taught to the others, that has to be repeated to Ananda. So Ananda, is said to be like a recorder of that time, like a librarian of that time. And there are some references in the Sangiti Sutta that seeing the Buddha saw that people were sometimes not properly reporting his teachings. He asked, Sariputra to codify his suttas. So it is said that the codification of the suttas, some people say that even the writings of the suttas began at the time of the Buddha, and there were people claiming that there were slates, wet mud, and they used to scribe on it, and then later it was transferred to palm leaves, and these palm leaves were scattered throughout the Indian subcontinent, and the big universities came as a compilers of the sutta. Like the Nalanda University was like a great compiler, because the Buddha's teachings were scattered throughout the length and breadth of the Indian subcontinent. So therefore, the university came into being to compile all these scattered the teachings of the Buddha. So Vasubandhu, Nagarjuna, they were all great compilers. They compiled these scattered teachings of the Buddha. Whatever people talk about different traditions in Buddhism, we have to bear in mind it's a one tradition, because there is no change in the Vinaya and the Sutta Pitaka of any tradition among the Buddhists, isn't it? So, we should never ever try to divide the Buddhism in different schools, because the core of Buddhism remains same everywhere. So having said this, that there were some bhikshus whose profession was just to memorize, and they were called the Bhanakas. Now, the verse number 4 goes like this: the Buddhist canonical literature is as vast as ocean. To memorize all this was indeed a great feat. Now we know that the Tripitaka is a voluminous body of texts. Hundreds of suttas, and then we have Vinay Pitaka, and that time the Abhidhamma Pitaka has not taken the shape that we see today. But the Buddha has given the lists. The Buddha has given the notes on mind. If we talk about Abhidhamma, and even by that standard, the Buddha's teaching is very huge. It's a vast body of knowledge. So as Baba Ambedkar says in verse number 4, the Buddhist canonical literature is as vast as ocean. To memorize all this was indeed a great feat. So there were specialized Bhanakas, like there were those people, memorized Sutta Pitak, they were called the Suttantikas. And those people who memorized the Vinaya were called the Vinayadhar, or whatever. And those people who memorized the Abhidhamma were called Abhidhammikos. And those people who only meditated, they were called the Jhaikos, like Jhayati, Jhan, and all. So, there were already people specializing in different aspects of the Buddhist canonical literature. And, sometimes they came together and sang together. That's why the word is Sangiti, because Sangiti connotes that the people are singing together. It was not just reading, they are singing. So singing also has a connotation of orality. So, the oral teachings of the Buddha, that's why the word singing comes, Sangiti, singing. So you see this verse number 4, the Buddhist canonical literature is as vast as ocean. To memorize all this was indeed a great feat. In reporting the Buddha, it has often been found that he was misreported. And there are a lot of incidences in the Pali Suttas that the Buddha was misrepresented, misreported. Many cases of misreporting had been brought to the knowledge of the Buddha while he was alive. So as I said, in the Sangiti Sutta, there is a reference that the Buddha was misreported. And Baba Ambedkar has indeed given the list of the suttas where the Buddha was misrepresented or misreported. Reference may be made by the way of illustration to 5 such cases. One is mentioned in Allagadda Uppama Sutta, and the other in the Mahakamma Vibhanga Sutta, a third in the Kanaka Atthala Sutta, and the fourth in the Mahatanna Sankhya Sutta, and the fifth in the Jivaka Sutta. So there are evidences of the misrepresenting or misreporting of the Buddha's teaching in the 5 suttas. You see how Dr. Baba Ambedkar goes into the depth of anything or everything. He has even given the list of the suttas where the Buddha was misrepresented. There were perhaps many more such cases of misreporting, for we find that even the bhikkhus going to the Buddha asking him to tell them what they should do in such contingencies. The cases of misreporting are common with regard to karma and rebirth. You see? So the topic which caused a lot of misreporting or misrepresentation was karma and rebirth. Isn't it? So this research mind and this bent of Baba Sahib's mind shows that, when he goes into inquiry into something, he will dig it deeper. He will go so much into it that, he will threadbare it so that we can all see what it is all about. So what Baba Sahib Ambedkar is saying here, that the cases of misreporting are common with regard to karma and rebirth. And we have seen in the previous sections as to how the karma and rebirth have been misreported, misrepresented, and completely different from the way the Buddha taught. These doctrines have also a place in the Brahmanic religion. Consequently, it was easy for the Bhanakas to incorporate the Brahmanic tenet into the Buddhist religion. Very self-explanatory that the people that time, there were dominant other systems of thoughts like Brahmanism or Jainism, and there were 60 to 64 different schools, that we have seen. We can see in the Brahmajal Sutta, then in the Samanyapal Sutta, we see the direct comparison with the 6 views of the time. And the verse number 10 explains it, that the doctrines have also a place in the Brahmanic religion. Consequently, it was easy for the Bhanakas to incorporate the Brahmanic tenet into the Buddhist religion. One has therefore to be very careful in accepting what is said in the Buddhist canonical literature as being the words of the Buddha. So you see, this is very profound. What Baba Sahib Ambedkar in a way is saying, that even the Buddhist canonical literature that we study, we have to be careful in accepting. It's like, Kalama Sutta. In Kalama Sutta, Buddha says that don't believe anything because it is coming from the Tripitaka. Isn't it? And, there is an orthodoxy now that, every single word in the Tripitaka has to be taken as the word of the Buddha. And that's nothing shorter than the fundamentalist view or an attitude that everything written in the Buddha and his Dhamma is like, has to be there, has to be taken as the ultimate word. So the position of the Buddha was different. So one has therefore to be careful in accepting what is said in the Buddhist canonical literature as being the word of the Buddha. 12, there is, however, one test which is available. So how do we know that certain things are said by the Buddha and certain things are not said by the Buddha? How do we know that? And therefore, I think this is a very important question as to how do we know that what is the word of the Buddha and what are not the words of the Buddha. Let me read it carefully and then we will know. If there is anything which could be said with confidence, it is, he was nothing if not rational. So the Buddha was a rational being. Buddha was a very thoughtful being. Buddha thought clearly. Buddha communicated clearly. He didn't ask anybody to take anything on the face of it. The Buddha encouraged his disciple to test everything. Just like the goldsmith will test whether the gold is pure or not, whether it has dross, whether it has some impurities. Just like that, the Buddha was encouraging the similar attitude that he has himself practiced all his life. So what was the Buddha's attitude? The Buddha was rational. And Baba Ambedkar is saying, is emphasizing on this point that the Buddha was nothing if not rational, if not logical. So you see the logic of the Buddha, we can see clearly in the Tripitakas. The Buddha is not asking anybody to believe something because he is saying it, to believe something which is not having any evidence in your experiences. The Buddha said that you believe something because you have seen it as it is. He's also asking not to believe in his Dhamma unless one understands, one knows by herself or himself whether the Buddha said is right or wrong. Anything, therefore, which is rational and logical, other things being equal, may be taken to be the words of the Buddha. One sentence, but we can understand the meaning behind it. Anything, therefore, which is rational and logical. So anything which is rational, logical, and other things being equal. Now, this is a very scientific term, other things being equal. So there might be some circumstances under which this thing might not be valid. So, we have to give discount to certain factors. But having given discount to certain factors, if something is rational and logical, then that thing must be taken as the word of the Buddha. So whatever, in some Buddhist tradition, it is said that whatever there is about the truth or the reality, it is the word of the Buddha. Anything truthful is the word of the Buddha. Anything rational, anything logical is the word of the Buddha. It's very, very unique and profound, statement. I like this verse number 13 so much because I think, it gives us, all of us, a tool to study the Dhamma. It gives all of us to a method to understand something. And I think I am going to read it again so that we can bear the implication of this verse number 13 in our mind. If there is anything which could be said with confidence, it is he was nothing if rational, if not logical. So Buddha was rational, Buddha was logical. So in a way, there is no scope for a Buddhist to become a fundamentalist. Now we see the textual fundamentalism all over the places. People say that because it is written in Bible or it is written in Quran or it is written in Vedas, it has to be taken as a truth. You cannot change a word. You have to accept it as it is written in the scriptures. While the Buddhist position is completely different. What the Buddha says is that you have to examine it rationally, you have to examine it logically, and Baba Ambedkar says other things being equal. Like sometimes we practice puja. So why do we conduct the Buddhist puja? Baba Ambedkar himself was fond of the Buddha puja. He was reciting the Tirtharan Panchashila all the time. In the morning he used to put a candle before the Buddha, and he has this tremendous faith in the Buddha. And we know that Baba Ambedkar was very rational, very logical, and an intellect of a deep penetration. Just like that, the Buddha was similarly like that. He was more rational, logical, and an intellectual giant, inventor of language, many things the Buddha was. So anything, therefore, which is rational and logical, other things being equal, may be taken to be the word of the Buddha. The word of the Buddha means Buddhavacana, isn't it? Now there is a lot of scholarship coming into being as to what are the original words of the Buddha. How do we know that these are the words of the Buddha? And some of the scholars are saying that when we read Pali text, but in particular, we can hear the historical Buddha. We can listen to the words of the historical Buddha. And that's why I always recommend reading the text, the Pali text. In translation also is okay, but we have to keep on reading the Buddhist text because they resonate with the words of the Buddha as he might have spoken. The stories that he might have spoken, we still have them with us. The second is that the Buddha never cared to enter into a discussion which was not profitable for man's welfare. Buddha never had any talk which was fruitless. Whatever Buddha taught was the Dhamma. Whenever Buddha opened the mind, or when he acted with his body, or when he thought, it was Dhamma. It is said that in the Zen tradition, it is said that the Buddha never uttered a word. Whatever he uttered was the Dhamma. Buddha never did any action. Whatever the way he acted was the Dhamma. His thoughts, his mind was Dhamma. His mind was detached from all this temporal and the ideas that control us, isn't it? His mind was has gone beyond, as it were, from the polarities of the thinking, from the two poles of extremities. His mind has gone beyond, and therefore the Buddha never ever entered into a discussion which was not profitable for man's welfare. Very beautiful, very profound. So when we read the scriptures, or when we study the Buddha's Dhamma, we have to bear this in mind, that whatever the Buddha taught has to benefit the humanity. Because the Buddha has never uttered a word which didn't benefit the humanity. So everything, every single word that the Buddha uttered during his lifetime, during his ministry, was the Dhamma, was the truth. It was the expression of his mind that has gone beyond. It was an expression of the rational, logical mind who understood the way it is, which, to understand something and to express something, can be the same thing. Otherwise, we will be parroting something, listening from here, listening from there, and parroting the same thing again and again. So without a deep thinking, without a deep realization, if we utter something, that might become just a parroting. And the Buddha was, of course, against parroting. Buddha was, of course, against imitation. Same with Baba Ambedkar. They encouraged us to think for ourselves. They encouraged us to be your own masters. And I think that is the beauty of this second thing. And that's the beauty of Baba's mind. He makes it so easy for us. But at the same time, he makes it very profoundly deeper. Easy and deep. These qualities of Buddhism, if we bear in mind, we can fathom a lot of the concepts very easily. The second thing is that the Buddha never cared to enter into a discussion which was not profitable for man's welfare. Therefore, anything attributed to the Buddha which did not relate to man's welfare cannot be accepted to be the word of the Buddha. We cannot accept it as the Buddhavacana if that vachan is of no benefit to the humanity. So everything the Buddha taught is for the welfare of the humanity, or the welfare of the human beings. The third test, there is a third test, it is this, that the Buddha divided all matters into two classes. Those about which he was certain and those about which he was not certain. So there was certain things the Buddha knew for surety. Buddha knew how the suffering arises. Buddha knew what the way towards the nirvana. Buddha knew it for sure. Just like we are holding something on the palms of our hands, we can see it. And the Buddha knew the path to the end of the suffering. The Buddha knew the path to the peace. The Buddha knew the path to the harmony. He knew it as it should be known. But on matters which fell into class 1, he has stated his views definitely and conclusively. Definitely and conclusively said that this is what it is. On matters which fell into class 2, he has expressed his views, but they are only tentative views. Very, 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 very profound. Because sometimes we have a habit of putting everything in the Dhamma. We say that Buddha has seen it 2,500 years back, that this is how it is. Buddha has seen quantum mechanics. Buddha knew relativity. We try to put what is happening today in the past and attribute it to the Buddha. And that attitude can be dangerous, very dangerous. So what happens is that what Baba Ambedkar is saying, that there are certain things on which the Buddha was sure, and his domain of pain and the release from the pain, suffering, and the release from the suffering is very clear. He had a very conclusive, definite views on that. There were a lot of things that the Buddha knew, And the Buddha had a definite, conclusive views on that. But there were certain things which were not available that time. The Buddha had expressed his opinions. But they are only tentative views. Like in Vinay Pitaka, there are a lot of things that we see as tentative. How to brush your teeth. That time there were no brushes available. So Buddha recommended that we should use the stick of certain plant, and we should mouthwash every day, because, and then he has given the benefits of why should we wash our mouth every day with that stick. And he has also told how to do that. And he said that if we purify our mind, we can test properly, there will not be bad smell, whatever. So the Buddha knew about certain things very clearly. The Buddha knew about the health and hygiene. The Buddhist Sangha was famous for health and hygiene. In fact, the Bhikkhu Jivaka was a doctor, and he brought this practice of hygiene and health in the Buddhist Sangha. And that was one of the reasons that a lot of people wanted to join the Buddhist Sangha, because they wanted to have a good health. Isn't it? So the fifth verse, there is a third test. It is that the Buddha divided all matters into two classes: those about which he was certain and those about which he was not certain. On matters which fell into class 1, he has stated his views definitely and conclusively. On matters which fell into class 2, he has expressed his views, but they are only tentative views. So there is no scope for fundamentalism in Buddhism. In Hindi, it is called lakir ke fakir. We just take some lines and we just hone on to them, saying that they are what they are to be taken as the eternal truth. See, what Buddha called eternal is a law, like na verani sammati cha kudachanan, averana cha sammati eso dhammo sanantano. So the where can never be appeased with where. Hatred can never be appeased with hatred. Only with love the hatred can be appeased. And this law, eso dhammo here in the sense of the law, is a sanantana dhammo. It's an eternal teaching. Never on the earth the hatred can be quenched with hatred. It cannot. It's not just possible. It's not compatible that you try to quench the fire with fire. You have to put water to quench the fire, to extinguish the fire. Very profoundly beautiful. So let me read them again. This verse number 13, 14, 15. And I think we have to bear these qualities in our mind when we study the Buddhism all the time. Number 1, if there is anything which could be said with confidence, it is this: he was nothing if not rational, if not logical. So rationality and logical mind is very important when we study the Buddhist Dhamma or any teaching of the Buddha, when we practice anything. Anything, therefore, which is rational and logical, other things being equal, may be taken to be the words of the Buddha. The second thing is that the Buddha never cared to enter into a discussion which was not profitable for man's welfare. Therefore, anything which attributed to the Buddha which did not relate to man's welfare cannot be accepted to be the words of the Buddha. There is a third test. It is that the Buddha divided all matters into two classes: those about which he was certain and those about which he was not certain. On matters which fell into class 1, he has stated his views definitely and conclusively. On matters which fell into class 2, he has expressed his views, but they are only tentative views. In discussing the 3 questions about which there is doubt and difference, it is necessary to bear this test in mind before deciding what the view of the Buddha was there on. So now I would like to urge you all to do the reverse thing. Keep these 3 tests in your mind and read the part 2 once again. That's homework for us. We wear this test of rationality, logical mind. It should benefit the humanity. Whatever the Buddha said, has to benefit the humanity, and certain views where the Buddha knew it for sure, conclusively. That one, and the matters which fell into this category number 2, where the Buddha has expressed his opinions. So I think we finished the part 2 here, which was a lovely discussion and an apt conclusion for our the 50th week that we have entered into. And in the next section of our class, we are going to begin part 3 of the book 4. So let's open up the class for the discussion for another 10-15 minutes. Anything on your mind, any ideas that you would like to share or talk about?
Hi, Jai Bhimal.
Jai Bhim Rao.
Just I want to share one thing regarding the context. We spoke about this means authenticity of the Buddhavacana and how they are misreported or misunderstood by other. One example, I tried to search regarding the Dhammapada. The question came into my mind after reading about Baba Sahib's article that he was insisting to include Chinese Dhammapada. He was reluctant about Indian Dhammapada. So I searched for that, did some Google that why he was doing like that, and I came across some Chinese Dhammapada thing. So I cross check only one Dhammapada inside the Brahman Vagga. So inside the Brahman Vagga, it is in the Chinese Dhammapada, it is said that there were 500 Brahmins in Saket state, and they were pretending to be arhats. So then Buddha made those arhats, and some scholars said that arhat are Brahmins like that. And then Buddha told them that this is not the way how you can become Brahmins, and he explained the ways how to become Brahmin. Means it is not the praising for the Brahmins, but if you look at the Indian Dhammapada, it is just like the Brahmins are having the good qualities, but he just removing that thing, the pretension of that Brahmins, how they were pretending, and he brought them on the track. So that was the difference. Also searching this thing, I came across the Sangharakshit one volume, I think volume 3 or 11, I'm not remembering the exact name. So he also tried to means my personal view is that he tried to criticize, show that also inside that volume Sangharakshita said that Baba Sahib was not aware of the Dhammapada Atthakatha. So it is similar like the Chinese Dhammapada. But I also bought that Dhammapada Atthakatha book, but it is based on the Indian Dhammapada version. The Atthakathas are based on the Indian. So Baba Sahib means he's not there to explain his stand, but he is far more advanced, we can say. So he has compared that things and give us a very brief conclusion. If we do not have the history or the reasons, we can find it, but we are on a conclusive state. That's what I mean to say.
I am so glad, Rahul, that you are doing this. I cannot say that I cannot resist from saying that this is what I was aiming at when we started these Buddhism classes, because you see a lot of confusion is spread by people, and sometimes they use Baba Sahib Ambedkar just as some kind of the frontispiece, and to put forward their agendas. And I have been always thinking that we have in Baba Sahib Ambedkar everything that we need to go ahead, and this conviction has been becoming more and more clear to me and deeper to me over the period of time. And one of the things that you just mentioned about Dhammapad is so profound, and I would request you, to carry on with your study and maybe write a paper. So comparative.
Can you please repeat? Actually, I lost that.
You should write a paper on this comparative study of Dhammapad.
Yep.
I will tell you how you can do it. Okay.
Yeah.
So, for example, Baba Sahib Ambedkar was not against this Pali Dhammapada.
Correct.
Okay, it's because he, in his writings, you can see the verses from Dhammapad.
Yep.
Because the very next section that we are going to study in the part 3 is Dhammapad.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so in this book now, after finishing this, whatever we are going to study is completely from Dhammapad.
Great.
The Buddhist way of life is from the Dhammapad. So Baba Sahib Ambedkar studied the Pali Dhammapad. There is no doubt about it.
Yep.
Okay. Why he liked Chinese Dhammapad, he has given the reason. Because there are stories.
Yep.
and stories are the pedagogical tools. And there is another Dhammapad which is available, and I got recently acquired a copy of it. It's called the Gandhari Dhammapad.
Okay.
Okay. Then there is a Sanskrit Dhammapad.
Yep.
And if you want, there is a copy of Rahul Sankritan where Pali, Sanskrit, and Hindi version of the Dhammapad he has given together. So in the Chinese Dhammapad, there is an additional Vagga, which is called the Nirvana Vagga.
Correct. There are 3-4 more of these Vaggas, I think. Yeah. Yep.
And this Nirvana Vagga is considered very profound, which is not there in Pali Dhammapad.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. And now the story that you have been telling about these Brahmanas and all these things.
Yeah.
So I think somebody needs to study the Brahman Vagga of the Pali Dhammapad and the Chinese Dhammapad.
Correct.
Isn't it? And I think I was trying to find out the English version of it, and it's available. The English translation.
Yeah. That is actually Babasaheb Ambedkar referred. That was from the Samuel Bean. And
Yes.
I ordered the same. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Very
And there I came to know again some historic thing is that from which the Chinese Dhammapada has been translated, the original copy is not with anyone, but that is the oldest source from where they copied. The original source is not there, but the copy is, and what we are having in India in Pali, so that is newer than that Chinese Dhammapada. So that is
true.
important for us. Yep.
That is true, because these gathas were compiled like a garland.
Correct.
Okay. So you are right. And some of the gathas of Dhammapad we also see in Sutta Nipat. So this is
Sutta Nipat is said as means there is very less chances are there inside the Sutta Nipat because some of the gathas of the Sutta Nipats are found engraved in the Ashoka's inscriptions.
Yes.
Inside that, I think Bairat, there are some gathas. One I remembered, that is Rahulovat Sutta.
Yes.
So 3-4 gathas from the Sutta Nipat are inscribed by the Ashokas. So it itself has that authenticity.
Yes. I got the complete list of it, and we can discuss. I'm very thrilled to have this discussion with you. And I think what we can do as the followers of Baba Ambedkar, they take these 3 tests, isn't it? And apply it to study the Buddhavacana.
Correct.
And the comparative study of not only religions, but also the different schools in Buddhism, of the different texts that are available in different Buddhist countries. If you can bring this tradition of comparative studies. And I think that is where Baba Sahib's genius lies.
Correct.
Because he was so widely read about the things. He could compare and he could draw his own conclusions. He could arrive at the truth.
Yep. Even the most intellectual persons like Sangarit Rakshita also sometimes doubt on Baba Sahib. But when we dig into that, so we can see that Baba Sahib has already gone through that as well.
Yes.
Only we don't have the references. If we do some efforts, we can come to that conclusion.
Yes. This is a big topic, and maybe some other day we can see it, because I have gone into it at length, and I've seen how
Definitely. We can see that. Yeah.
So,
yes. Yeah.
So I can pinpoint various attitudes and that, but we don't need to do that. I think what we do, our aim is to deepen the scholarship. Our aim is to go as much deep into the corpus of literature available into Baba Sahib's treasury. So Pankaj bhai.
Mangesh bhai, Jai Bhim, Namo Buddhaya.
Jai Bhim, Namo Buddhaya.
I was just thinking of the words what you said just now. This taste came from the genius of Dr. Ambedkar, and he boiled down it to the 3 points. Now this, I think it is not the test only to judge or to understand the words of Buddha, whether those belongs to him or not, but it is applicable everywhere in life, in any profession, in any writing, or you do anything. Such a beautifully he pointed down, no? He's saying anything which is rational and logical and supporting it with the humanity.
Yes.
How it will not be acceptable to any mind? You tell me.
That's
so
true.
I think it is to be applied everywhere in your day-to-day activity.
Yes.
And it is an attitude, what we call as a Buddhist attitude.
Yes.
Just it is a reflection, Mangesh bhai.
Oh, that's beautiful representation. reflection, and we should write on this. We should explore this as much as we can in our individual lives and in the social lives and wherever we are. We should go deep into these things. So, anybody else?
Yeah.
Sunanda ma'am.
Yeah, I would like to say something.
Yes.
Mangeshji, thank you so much that you are conducting these classes. And
So it's my pleasure.
Really so nice of you that explaining you so well that if we just read the Buddha and his Dhamma, it's very difficult to understand. Then without reading, it's not possible to understand everything. But the way you have explained it, it's really excellent. There is no words to say, and thank you so much that you are regularly taking these classes and enlightening all of us.
I am
So
very
thank you
pleased to
very
hear
much.
this, Sunanda. I am very pleased to hear.
Madam,
No,
you
are
join
really
this
doing
celebration.
job.
You join
Yes,
celebration.
yes,
So you can express
we
your.
should celebrate.
What I'm
Yeah,
saying, Sunanda ma'am, what I'm saying. Hello, can you hear me, Sunanda ma'am?
Yes, yes.
This book is
Yes,
not
I
easy.
can.
This book is not easy. Babas have said that it's difficult.
Definitely not. Yes.
Okay, but that doesn't
It's
mean that we
not
cannot
easy
understand it.
for the person. Right. We cannot understand, but whatever person has given,
Yes.
like he has done a lot of study, he has gone into the depth, and he has analyzed everything, and whatever is the best he has given us.
Yes.
So we are very lucky to have this book, and whatever Baba Sahib has compiled, it's really we don't have words to say that what we have got from Baba Sahib.
Right.
So we are really thankful and happy that we have this book with us, and we are doing reading on this. And there are, it should reach to each and every person to know about the details of this book. So if that happens, I think the people will, whatever the misunderstanding people have, that will go away, and it will be really helpful to everyone.
Yes, yes, yes.
And I would like to say one thing that Rahul has said something about the Chinese Dhammapada. If we can share the sources of that literature, it will be good. Even we can go through it.
Sure.
One more thing I want to say that when we read the translations and when we read the original Pali text, there is a lot of difference we can make out, because whenever there is a translation, the person who is doing translation, their views are there in that translation. So many times the originality of that sutta or Dhammapada is not being maintained. So we should read original text either in Chinese or in Pali. So that will definitely give us the exact meaning of whatever Buddha has said. And everyone should learn Pali and read the original literature. That's my view, which I have done it, and everybody should do it.
It's a lifetime practice, Sai. Good. It's a lifetime practice.
Yes. It's like an ocean. It's like an ocean, and when you start studying, then we realize the depth of it, and we feel that there is so much to learn, so much to study. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sandra. Okay. Anything else? If there is nothing, I have one suggestion. What I will do, I will just stop here the class, and I will relog in the Zoom, so that I can get this copy of this class, and I can upload it on the YouTube, and then we will join whatever 1 hour. I think Alka madam and Rucha madam, do you want to still go for the celebration today, or because we have very less number of people? Alka madam, should we go because on for celebration, because there are very few people today?
Yes, but
whatever your views,
we can have.
Okay, then let me do this. I will just stop the recording, log out, and then again all of you join, and then we will have another fresh session, and I will also record it and send it to you all. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Just give me 2 minutes. Okay.